So today we're looking at a simple Scratch Junior project which is about floating and sinking and relies on tapping different characters on the screen to make them either float or sink. This could easily be adapted to anything that has two choices, for instance, whether something is magnetic or non-magnetic. If you want to get even a little bit more complicated, you could add more choices and have objects travel to a particular part of the screen. For instance, a box labelled with different types of recyclable objects. I'm going to show you an example first of the floating and sinking. Then we'll look at how we can make it step by step. And I'll also include some notes underneath the video of where this fits with the new digital technologies areas of the New Zealand technology curriculum. While I've gone through this step by step, this does not mean that you should necessarily do this with your learners. If they are very new to Scratch, then it can be a good idea to step them through the process. But along the way, give as much control over to them as you can. Allow them choice of characters and backgrounds, for example, but also asking them along the way, which blocks do you think we would use if this is the outcome that we're wanting? So you're really reinforcing that we use this input to get this particular output and giving them the choices. With those who are very familiar with Scratch, just set them the task. Okay, you need to demonstrate your knowledge of floating and sinking, or let's create an activity for some other students about floating and sinking, and let them then create the whole thing from beginning to end, with you just supporting them where needed.
Which things float? On the next screen, tap the objects to see if you are correct.
So in order to make our floating and sinking project, we're going to click on the plus button to create a new project. Going to delete Scratch the Cat by pressing and holding and then pushing the cross button to delete him. We're going to add a suitable background. So background is in the center at the top. And I could choose one of the existing backgrounds here. So I could choose this one, which is an underwater scene, but I can also edit this scene by clicking on the paintbrush tool, then selecting the line tool and the color that I want. I might make the brush a little bit thicker. Then I can add in some waves, for example, to make this into more of a scene where there is actually a place for things to float, because otherwise it's all going to be underwater and there's going to be no floating. So I've prepared one of these earlier, so I'll use that. And now I'm going to add the objects that are going to be floating or sinking. These can be added from the character list. So for example, I might get this boat, which is coming a little large, so I use the purple menu and I use the shrink tool in order to shrink that down to the size that I want it. And then I throw away that block. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat just adding characters and resizing them. If a character that you want isn't there, I can click on the plus button and I can create one by using the paintbrush tools and just drawing something that I want. So I'll show you an example of that, where I could add a rock, for example. In this case, I've drawn a rock and I've written rock on it simply because it's a little hard to identify what it actually is once you shrink it down a little. Ready to go. So now I have all my objects, and I need to then have them react when they're tapped to either float or sink. I'm going to start off by giving them all their home positions. So the little flag, little circle next to the flag at the top, if I tap on an object and then tap on the blue circle, that sets the home position. So whenever I start this, they'll return to that home position. So I need to do that for each of them. Now I'm going to use the tap button in the yellow menu instead of the flag. So here we've got the tap button. So it's going to be telling them what to do if they are tapped. In this case, they're just going to move down just one. In this case, they're going to move down one and then stay there. And I'm also going to have a little message. So using the purple menu and the speech bubble, I can change that text to I float and go. And I can now copy that same code onto the other objects that float. So in this case, the flower and not any of the others. So I copy the code onto other objects that float, and in this case that's the flower. The flower now has that code. The flower now has that same code. I'm going to click on the next object that doesn't float, and I'm going to again use the tap, and this time the down, and this time they're going to go down to the bottom. So I'm going to try approximately 13. It's a bit of trial and error to see how far down they need to go. And then I'm going to put in a message that says, I sink. Okay. And I'm going to copy that code onto the other objects that sink. So I'm going to have my cake and my rock having that. I could also, if I wanted to, add a voice recording. So that's in the green menu. So I could tap the microphone, then tap the red button. I sync, then tap the tick, creates an extra little icon there, a little extra code block, which I can then drag down here. So now it will say I sync, and also it will be a voice recording as well as a speech bubble. The only thing with that is that you will have to create a separate voice file for each of your characters. You can't copy the code for the voice recording over onto the other characters. It just will put in a pop sound instead. So I'm going to delete that second scene. And I'm going to use a diver this time. I could use any character I like, but I think diver seemed to make sense in this context. So here we go. We've got a diver. I'm going to make him a bit smaller using the resize tools in the purple menu. And now I'm going to have him do something on the start. So I'm going to use the green flag. So he's not going to need to be tapped in order to do something. And he's going to give the instructions. So we're going to start off with his first instructions, backspace and get rid of what was already there. He's going to say do these things float or sink? Okay, so now I've got my little question, and then I'm going to give the instructions. Tap the objects to see if you are right. Okay, so now I've got my instructions for the end user, and I could adjust those instructions depending on who's likely to be the end user of the program. And again, if necessary, I could add in some voice instructions too if I know that the users are likely to have difficulty reading the screen. I don't want my diver to stay in the middle there, so I'm going to now have him swim off screen. Bit of trial and error. I think round about 10 is going to be the best amount there for him to swim off to the right. But I'm also going to make him hide, so he will disappear as he starts to float off screen. And because I'm having him disappearing, I'm going to put in a little appear block so that whenever the program starts, he will be visible, because I don't want him to be still hiding. So let's see how this little program runs. I'm going to put it into full screen mode. Up beside the house, there is the full screen button. And now I'm going to press the green flag. And now that he's given his instructions and he swims off and disappears, and now I can tap on each of the objects to see if I am right. And if necessary at that stage, I can make any adjustments of anything that isn't working. So now I just need to put in the home button, so each of the sprites will return to its home position whenever the green flag is pressed. So in order to do that, I need to go to the blue menu, and it is the final button there, and I'm going to drag that down and put it just after the flag at the start, and then I will repeat that for each of the characters, and then it is ready to go. I tap on my yellow shape up in the top right hand corner to give my project a name. Okay, if I wanted to share this, I would click for parents, solve the little maths problem, and I can share it via email. If I want to share it to another iPad or a Chromebook, which have to be running Scratch, or by airdrop if I'm sharing it from an iPad to another iPad. Again, both need to have the Scratch program on them. Then I click the tick, and that is ready to go.